Well, hello everyone. I do hope you're having a great day today. I hope that you were in the house of the Lord with us yesterday for worship. Man, we had a great worship experience yesterday. Man, the Spirit of the Lord was there and came in and just moved in such a marvelous way. We just had a great time in the house of the Lord. Well, hey, it's Monday now. It's a brand new week that God has given us, so why don't we just go ahead and let's believe God to do great things, not just today, but let's believe that God's going to do great things all week long. Well, welcome to another edition of Take 5. Now this week we are dealing with the subject that I preached on Sunday. We're actually starting a new series. I didn't know it was going to turn into a series when I first began to study for this, but the more I studied, this thing just kind of it kind of grew a little bit, and so it's going to be a series, last a couple of weeks, 2 or 3, I don't know exactly how much, but we're going to deal with this thought, the process of neglect. Now, when I say neglect, I'm talking about, spiritual neglect. I'm not talking about physical abuse or emotional abuse and neglect or anything like that. I'm talking about the process of spiritual neglect. When you neglect your spiritual life, you can just imagine what happens. Ruin and decay and destruction is soon to follow, but it doesn't happen immediately. That's why we're calling this a process. If you look at an old rundown, dilapidated house, it didn't get that way overnight. It was a process. So it is with our spiritual lives. If we don't care for them properly, over a length of time and through a process, our spiritual lives will ruin. They'll just turn into a mess. Now we're going to read a scripture from Proverbs 24. I'm really not going to do much talking about this passage this week. We're going to go into detail on Proverbs 24 next week. But I want to read this because this just sets the tone of where we're going. So here we go. Proverbs 24 verse 30 through 34 says, Solomon now, he says, I passed by the field of a sluggard. That's a lazy man, okay? By the vineyard of a man lacking sense. And behold, it was overgrown with thorns, the ground was covered with nettles, and its stone wall was broken down. And I saw it and considered it. I looked and received instruction. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. He's not talking about the needed sleep that every person needs. He's talking about unnecessary sleep. He's talking about, laziness and lethargy when it comes to spiritual things. That's what he's talking about. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come upon you like a robber and want like an armed man. I was thinking about that passage as I was looking over it this past week and reading what Solomon was saying. He said that he passed by the field of a man that he knew was a sluggard. He knew he was a lazy man. He knew he was a neglectful man. And he knew because the field was overgrown with thorns and the ground was covered with nettles, and he knows that did not happen overnight. It took a period of time of this man continually neglecting his field for it to get that way. He said the stone wall, that the fence basically around this man's vineyard was broken down, and that didn't get broke down overnight. It was a period of time of that fence being neglected that has gotten it in the shape that it was in. And he basically says it's because this man was lazy. He was neglectful because he was lazy. He was a sluggard. He was indolent. And that's what we've got to guard against, because that is what leads to neglect, is laziness, spiritual laziness. We just don't do what we should when we should, and we neglect it, and we put off the little things, and the little things turn into big things. I want to define neglect if I can, because we're going to be talking about it all week long. Definition number 1 is to disregard or to make insignificant or trivial in care or treatment of something. So if the care of something, if the treatment of something, if it becomes insignificant to me, that means then I am neglecting it. Definition number 2, to omit through indifference or carelessness. Indifference means it doesn't matter to me either way. I can do with it or I can do without it, and you omit it because it really doesn't matter. That's neglect. And then definition number 3 is to fail to carry out necessary maintenance, which leads to decay and eventually destruction. That's neglect. So we see these definitions now, and to apply them to our spiritual lives is going to be difficult. It's really going to kind of be one of those situations you don't want to address, but it's one of those things, it's necessary. It's necessary that we talk about it. It's necessary that we do it, because every spiritual life needs proper maintenance. It needs proper care. You can't just allow little things to go on and on and on in your life, because those little things will develop into bigger things. And the next thing you know, something that was just decaying now ends up being completely destroyed because we neglected it. And it happened in a process. It didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen immediately. It was a process of neglect. So neglect can change the whole purpose of something. It can change the nature of a thing so greatly that it can even be hard to recognize it anymore. Have you ever wondered how the bad section of town got that way? I'm sure it was developed. I'm sure the mayor didn't sit down with the council and say, hey, let's develop the slums for this town. I'm sure that didn't happen. When you look at the bad section of town, at one time, there was good people living there. They had hopes, they had dreams, they had families, and they were hoping to have a good future. But somewhere along the way, something happens when we begin to neglect these things, little things. When we neglect little things turn into big things, and it doesn't happen overnight, but over a period of time, it happens. And the next thing you know, you look around, 5, 10, 15, 20 years has passed, and something that used to be just a minor issue has now caused major problems because we allowed the process of neglect to exist. That's what we're going to deal with this week, but we're going to talk about it in our spiritual lives. Hey friend, let me tell you something. We cannot afford to allow the little things that are wrong in our life, and everybody has them because we're imperfect. We cannot allow the little things in our life to keep on. It's that faucet that you allow to leak in a house. It's that sink that you allow to leak and you never address it and you never deal with it and you forget about it and you put it out of your mind, and the next thing you know, the floor is rotted out, the cabinets are rotted out, and you've got a whole mess because of something little you neglected and didn't deal with. And it didn't happen overnight. It was a process that happened over time. We got to deal with those things in our spiritual lives, or our spiritual lives end up just the same way as an old house gets run down. Well, hey, I got to get out of here. It's been good being with you today. I look forward to being with you tomorrow on Tuesday's edition of Take 5. Until then, God bless you. Have a great and godly day. And don't forget, friend, don't neglect those little things. When you see a problem in your life, let Jesus deal with it, so that it doesn't become something bigger than it was ever intended to be. God bless you. Have a great day.